Welcome to the Virginia and Truckee channel. It's a new video in April of 2011. We're doing a little bit of a flashback to July 24th, 2010, when the McCloud number 18, which is currently being leased to the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, was taken out for its first revenue run. Now, this locomotive was delivered from Sierra Railroad with many problems that go back decades. It was delivered in 2009. And we will be doing an interview here with Charlie Cross, the Chief Mechanical Officer at the V&T. So I spent some time at the Virginia and Truckee Shops today, April 3rd, 2011, and this video is part 1 of 3 of an interview I did with Charlie Cross about what they're doing to the McCloud number 18. You'll hear this clank, 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 and that's one of the problems that they're fixing right now, where they're going to re-pour new Babbitt bearings. So watch the rest of the video, enjoy, and thanks for watching this channel. Well, it's Sunday, April 3rd, 2011. I'm standing here with Charlie Cross, who's the Deputy Chief Mechanical Officer for the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. And we're just going to take a little bit of a tour and see what these guys are doing. There's a lot of hard work that goes into getting these locomotives ready for the season. And you're working on the 18 pretty hard right now. What's the main thing you have going on?
The main thing right now is the front and rear trucks of this locomotive. It's a 282 Mikado, so it's got a front pilot truck and then it's got a rear trailing truck. And they needed a lot of work. Essentially, tire thicknesses were too thin, excuse me, to actually turn them. Because you can actually, over time, your flanges become too thin, and that can maybe lead to derailments and picking frogs and everything like that on the track.
Okay.
So you have to, over time, eventually replace them. You can turn them down, but they come to a certain thickness, so you have to drop the axles out.
Wow.
And then we're also addressing other problems that this engine hadn't, problems that hadn't been addressed in the past, and particularly bearings. We're pouring Babbitt on this engine for the bearings, and lateral play too, since it also has Babbitt surfaces for wearing, and just making it a whole lot better. And once these items are done, we won't have to touch them for about 10-12 years.
Wow. So what you're doing here is for like the long haul.
Absolutely.
Before we go look at specific things, just to explain a couple bits of terminology that you use. You said picking frogs, which means not like snagging on switches. The frog is part of the switch, right?
Yeah, the frog is part of the switch. It kind of is the transferring point of when you're crossing between one track to another. It starts making like chips and shavings off of things.
Okay, that makes sense.
The track guys don't like that, and it's not good for the track, and the engine doesn't like that. So it all works. It has to work together.
Okay. So otherwise you're going to derail, right? So,
you could.
Or you could destroy the switch.
Well, you could wear down the frogs too. Okay, and those are pretty pricey too. So that requires a track gang going out there, and
And you need your track gangs working on the locomotive right now, or at least you need to focus your resource on getting these things ready for the season. We're going to look mostly at the 18, but the 29 is also getting some repairs, so maybe we'll take a minute to look at that when we're done with the 18. The other quick thing that people might be interested in is a Babbitt bearing, which I didn't even understand until talking to him earlier. Babbitt's the actual material, you said? What is it? What's the alloy made of again?
Babbitt, there's so many different grades, but in general what we're going to be using here is grade 7.
Okay.
Most car engines, like old car engines, like Model Ts, they had Babbitt bearings in, so they used grade 2. But grade 7 can withstand the weight and pressure and load of it. But it's 75% lead based.
Wow.
It's an old art that not many people do anymore. It's outdated, but there still are things that need it, like steam engines,
yeah,
for instance.
Because I think most people familiar with an engine from a car are used to seeing the crank. You take off the bearing caps and you take the crankshaft out and you put pre-poured bearings in. But Babbitt means you actually pour the bearing in place, and then you have to machine it somehow to get a good surface on it once you pour it, or?
Well, you can use a mandrel, such as a mandrel would be the actual diameter of the bearing, the axle, and then. Obviously you're going to have to, they make Babbitt scrapers and clean it, but you're going to make sure that when you do it, you leave yourself plenty enough clearance room. That's the key. so you don't overheat it.
Because if it's too tight, there's too much friction.
Right.
Let's go take a look, because I'm sure some people are still wondering what we're talking about here. So let's take a look at what you're actually talking about.
Okay, that sounds good. We got a big tour.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Okay, well, we're taking a look. So tell us what we're looking at here.
What we're looking at right here is the main crank pin on the number 18. Essentially, you have a brass bearing that goes over here, and this type uses a floating bushing.
Okay.
The old way of doing it was two halves would come together, and over time you could key them up to keep the tolerances down.
Okay.
And but they use a floating bushing. Usually, it was a standard practice to use 15 thousandths between the outside gun iron bushing, and then 15 thousandths between the pin itself right here and brass. So that would give you a total clearance of 30 thousandths or a 32nd, and that's a good number to be at. It gives you plenty enough room for grease, but plenty enough room so it's not tight.
So it doesn't bang around and make a bunch of noise either. It's not too loose.
Right, right. So eventually those wear out. I mean, a steam engine is designed to wear out and be replaced. You got to put life back into it eventually.
Yeah.
Every time you run them, they eat some of the life away, both boiler and running gear wise. So
it's an expensive proposition. It's not just buying the locomotive; it's maintaining it.
Right. That is the tricky part. Is putting life back into the consumption of what it's used.
And before we get into more detail, can you explain real quick, like how old are you? You're like 42 years old?
Yes, I'm 42 years old, just turned.
How old are you? You're like 20 something, right?
You'll be turning 22.
22, I forget. I always think you're 25 or 28 or
No.
something. So where'd you learn this stuff? In Ely? And then
yeah, I started at the Nevada Northern Railway in Ely, Nevada. And, talking with a lot of old timers, what was left of them that worked on this, doing it hands-on, making mistakes, doing a lot of reading too. There's plenty of books out there, believe it or not, that still show, how this can be done, but it all requires doing that on your own time.
Yeah, but how many guys in your age group, like 20 to 30 years old, know how to do this stuff in Nevada? Like one?
I wouldn't say one. There's probably maybe 4 or 5 that are actually kind of involved in steam in some way in locomotives at the State Museum and out there in Ely and here at the V&T Railroad.
That's pretty rare though. So
there's not many young kids doing it, but there is a big influx of in Seattle, across the country really, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Peers my age that are interested, and I believe whatever I can learn from Tom Gray or a Dave Griner, anyone who's willing to share some information, I'm willing to listen and learn, because when they're gone, they're gone. It's the last of a dying breed.
Yeah. Well, that's really good, because most people, when they're 22, they still know everything. So.
Yeah, they still know everything.
Now, is this the Babbitt bearing yet?
No, this is not a Babbitt bearing.
So this is going to be something that's a preformed bushing.
Yeah, this is a bearing bronze essentially.
All right, well, let's take a look next at something that has a Babbitt bearing on it, so people can really see that.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
All right, we're going to quickly just go over the Babbitt bearings and so forth on our front truck. This is what Babbitt looks like. It's called an ingot.
Wow.
You got to melt this to 650 degrees, and then it becomes molten, and then you got to pour it. So anyhow, that's what Babbitt comes in. It's 8 pounds per ingot for grade 7. Anyhow, this is a Babbitt bearing. This is a bad ordered bearing because it is cracked, and this is off of the 18. So we had a new brass, basically part of which that's what the Babbitt holds on to, cast up, and then we pour in the Babbitt and form it to the axle and give yourself the clearance, and then we go ahead and scrape it out and get the right clearance on it. And then of course you gotta make sure you have your oil holes, since these are oil, not grease.
So those are those 2 holes we're looking at?
Yeah,
because I'm pretty zoomed in there.
Here, right here. This is where the oil can sit up there, and it's like a reservoir. So
this right here, this is the bearing that was on 18?
Yes.
We're running, so you can actually run a locomotive with cracks and with certain deficiencies. There's like worn out and worn.
Yeah.
And is this worn or worn out?
This is certainly worn out and needs to be addressed, and that's one thing we noticed. You know, it wasn't running hot, it wasn't scarring anything, but it's not good. You have the thing down, take care of it. So we went ahead and are gonna do it, you know, do it right, get it done since you have it apart, because you take things apart, it takes too long, a lot of man hours. You could be doing other things.
How many, I mean, so a couple more quick questions and we'll move to the next thing. You're basically going to pour in there and keep that piece, or you're going to pour a whole new piece? That's what I'm not sure, I'm not
This
understanding.
entire piece here will actually be gone. It will look like this without any Babbitt in it.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and tin it, and then we'll pour the Babbitt in there. And
that's what gives you the surface?
Yes, this is what the Babbitt clings to.
So this is the part I'm still not getting, is how thick is the Babbitt that you pour in there going to be? Are we talking just like half an inch? A quarter inch, that's it?
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't want it too thick. About a quarter inch is okay.
Wow.
But that gives you enough time for it to wear.
And how do you make 650 degrees in here?
We made a propane burner.
Go over there and show us. That's interesting.
Propane burner here. Pretty simple. We use propane, and we use our shop air to kind of give it that extra juice and a nice hot blue flame. And here's our cast iron pot here, and we put that ingot that I showed you in and start letting it melt and stirring it, and then you scrape off the impurities at the top, and when you're ready to start pouring.
So you basically want to do that before August? I mean, as far as heat-wise, you don't want to be in here on a 100-degree day.
No, it can get pretty hot.
Okay.
So that's how we melt the Babbitt.
And then just real quick, you know, before we move to the next thing, when we're looking at all these projects, I mean, this isn't something you're going to have turned out next week. This is a couple months of work we're looking at, or?
Well, the entire scope of it is, you know, when it comes together, yes, it's a couple months of work.
Wow.
Especially when things are, you know, you're starting fresh, clean, we're doing it right, you know, it takes a while.
Yeah.
Certain things we have to send out to bigger shops to turn on lathes, because we don't have a big enough lathe to turn something 32 inches in diameter.
Like the wheels that we're going to look at later?
Right, essentially. So, you know, we have some lead time, so we do as much as we can to get, you know, stay on top of things, and when things get back, we're ready to go.
All right, well, let's go take a look at the next thing.
Okay.